The thunderous roar of the rising creek echoed through Shadow Valley like the hoofbeats of 1,000 wild horses. Isaac Emerson clutched the brim of his hat against the punishing wind, squinting against the torrential downpour that had been pummeling the Wyoming Territory for 3 days straight. The spring of 1878 had brought rains unlike any the region had seen in decades, transforming peaceful streams into raging monsters that devoured everything in their path. Isaac urged his sturdy paint horse forward along the ridge, his weathered duster offering little protection against the elements. At 32, he had seen his share of nature's fury, but something about this storm felt different, more personal, as though it had come to wash away the last traces of the life he'd once known. 5 years had passed since he'd buried his wife and infant son, victims of a fever that swept through their homestead with merciless efficiency. 5 years of drifting, taking odd jobs on ranches across the frontier, never staying long enough to form attachments. His heart had calcified, becoming as hard and unyielding as the rocky terrain beneath his horse's hooves. The paint horse suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward. Isaac followed the animal's gaze and felt his breath catch. Through the sheets of rain, he spotted movement in the valley below where no movement should be. The creek had already breached its banks, flooding the lower pastures, and the water continued to rise with frightening speed. A desperate cry pierced the air, barely audible above the storm. Isaac narrowed his eyes, making out the shape of a small wagon trapped on a narrow strip of land that was rapidly becoming an island in the swollen waters. Beside it stood a woman, her soaked dress clinging to her frame as she struggled with something at the rear of the wagon. "Come on, Thunder!" Isaac urged his horse down the slippery path. "Someone's fool enough to be caught in this mess." As he drew closer, he could see the woman more clearly. She was attempting to free a horse, no, a foal that appeared to be tethered to the back of her wagon. The mother horse was nowhere in sight, and the young animal was panicking, pulling against its restraints as the water lapped at its legs. "Hold on!" Isaac called out, his voice nearly lost in the wind. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "Please help us!" she shouted back, continuing her struggle with the frightened foal. Isaac guided Thunder through the rising water, which now reached the horse's chest. The current was strong, threatening to sweep them both away, but the paint was sure-footed and determined. As they reached the shrinking island of land, Isaac leapt from his mount. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" he demanded, immediately working to untie the knot securing the foal. "The bridge was still standing when I started across," the woman explained, her voice shaking. "It collapsed behind me, and then the water rose so fast." "Where were you headed?" "Elkhorn Ridge, my brother's place. I'm Josephine Keller," she added, as if proper introductions mattered when they were moments from being swept away. Isaac finally freed the foal, which immediately pressed against Josephine, trembling. "Isaac Emerson, we need to move, Miss Keller. This whole area is going under." "My things," she gestured to the wagon. "Leave them," Isaac said firmly. "Nothing in there worth dying for." A crack of thunder split the sky, and the foal reared in terror. Josephine struggled to calm the animal, her hands gentle but firm on its neck. "Shh, Scout, it's all right," she murmured, somehow maintaining composure despite their dire situation. Isaac assessed their options quickly. The water was rising by the minute, and the nearest high ground was at least half a mile away. Thunder could carry 2, but the foal complicated matters. "Can that young one swim?" he asked, nodding toward Scout. Josephine shook her head. "He's only 4 months old. He's strong, but not in this current." Isaac made a decision. "I'll take you across first, then come back for the foal." "No," she said firmly, meeting his gaze with unexpected steel. "I won't leave him." The refusal irritated Isaac, but something in her eyes' determination mixed with genuine concern for the animal stopped his protest. He'd seen too many people willing to abandon animals when things got difficult. "Fine. We go together, but you follow my lead exactly." Isaac rigged a makeshift lead for the foal from the leather reins he found in the wagon. He mounted Thunder, then extended his hand to Josephine. She hesitated only briefly before grasping it, allowing him to pull her up behind him. The foal's lead rope was wrapped securely around Isaac's saddle horn. "Hold tight to me," he instructed. "If we get separated, head for higher ground to the east." Josephine's arms encircled his waist, her grip firm despite her shivering. The foal balked initially, but followed when Thunder started moving, instinct telling the young animal to stay with the others. The crossing was treacherous. Twice, Thunder nearly lost his footing on submerged debris. The foal struggled, sometimes swimming, sometimes being partially dragged through the shallower sections. Isaac felt Josephine's grip tighten each time the young horse faltered, but she remained silent, offering no complaints or hysterics. When they finally reached higher ground, all three animals and both humans were exhausted. The rain continued to fall, though less violently than before. Isaac helped Josephine dismount, noting how she immediately went to check on the foal, running her hands over its trembling body to assess for injuries. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him with rainwater still streaming down her face. "We would have died without your help." Isaac dismounted, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "We both know that's not true," Josephine replied. She had an accent he couldn't quite place, not quite Eastern, but educated. "Are you from around here?" "Working at the Rocking Bee Ranch, about 5 miles north." He glanced at the sky. "Storm's easing, but we can't stay here. My cabin's closest." "My brother will be worried. Elkhorn Ridge is another 15 miles east. We wouldn't make it before nightfall, and there's more rain coming." Isaac loosened Thunder's cinch to give the horse a moment's relief. "Besides, your foal needs shelter and care." Josephine appeared to weigh her options, then nodded. "You're right, Mr. Emerson. I'm grateful for your offer." The journey to Isaac's cabin took nearly 2 hours as they picked their way carefully through the storm-altered landscape. Fallen trees and new gullies carved by the rushing water made their progress slow. Isaac noted with grudging respect how Josephine never complained, even when they had to dismount and lead the horses through particularly difficult stretches. His cabin came into view as the last light was fading from the sky, a simple one-room structure with a small lean-to stable attached. It wasn't much, but it was dry and solid, built with his own hands over the past year. "It's not fancy," he warned as they approached. "It looks perfect," she replied sincerely. Isaac helped Josephine settle the foal in the stable alongside Thunder, providing fresh hay and water for both animals. Inside the cabin, he quickly built a fire in the small stone hearth, filling the space with welcome warmth and light. Josephine stood awkwardly just inside the door, water pooling around her boots. Her dress was sodden, her dark hair plastered to her head in wet ringlets. Now that he could see her clearly, Isaac realized she was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 25, with intelligent hazel eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "I have some dry clothes you can borrow," he offered, rummaging through a trunk. He pulled out a shirt and pair of trousers. "They'll be too big, but they're clean and dry." "Thank you," she said, accepting the bundle. "Could I trouble you for some privacy?" Isaac nodded, feeling foolish for not thinking of it himself. "I'll check on the animals." Outside, he leaned against the stable wall. Trying to make sense of the day's events, he'd spent 5 years avoiding entanglements, and now he had a woman in his cabin and her foal in his stable. The situation felt like a cruel joke from whatever gods had taken his family a test of the walls he'd built around his heart. When he returned, Josephine had changed and hung her wet garments near the fire. Isaac's clothes engulfed her slender frame, the shirt sleeves rolled up multiple times to free her hands. She'd found a piece of twine to cinch the trousers at her waist, and she'd used his comb to untangle her hair, which now fell in damp waves past her shoulders. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the comb. "I found it on your shelf." "It's fine," he replied, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd shared his space with another person. He busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee, grateful for the distraction. They ate in relative silence, the crackle of the fire and the persistent drumming of rain on the roof filling the space between them. Eventually, Josephine spoke. "You're probably wondering what I was doing out in this weather with a young foal." Isaac looked up from his plate. He had been wondering, but hadn't planned to ask. "Your business is your own, Miss Keller. Please call me Josephine or Josie if you prefer." She set down her tin cup. "I'm coming from Denver. My husband died 6 months ago, leaving me with debts I couldn't pay. My brother invited me to stay with his family while I decide what to do next." "And the foal?" A small smile touched her lips. "Scout was a gift from my husband shortly before he passed. His mother died foaling him. James, my husband, knew how much I loved horses. He said Scout would be my new beginning." Her voice wavered slightly. "I couldn't leave him behind." Isaac nodded, understanding the attachment all too well. After Rachel and their son died, his horses had been the only living creatures he could bear to be around. "Your brother knows you're coming?" he asked. "Yes, though he expected me yesterday. The rain delayed me." She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I should have waited for better weather, but the landlord was evicting me from our home. I had little choice." There was something she wasn't saying. Isaac could sense it, but he didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, their burdens to carry alone. "We'll get word to your brother tomorrow," he promised. "The ranch has a boy who runs messages. Once the rain stops, I'll send him to Elkhorn Ridge." "You're very kind, Mr. Emerson." "Isaac," he corrected, surprising himself. "If I'm calling you Josephine, you might as well use my given name." She smiled, and something in Isaac's chest tightened unexpectedly. "Isaac, then. Thank you." As the evening progressed, Isaac made a pallet for himself near the door, insisting Josephine take his bed. It was a simple affair, a sturdy wooden frame with a straw-filled mattress, but it was comfortable, and more importantly, dry. "I can't take your bed," she protested. "You're not taking it, I'm offering it," he replied firmly. "Get some rest. We'll figure out next steps in the morning." Josephine hesitated but eventually acquiesced, clearly exhausted from the day's ordeal. Within minutes of lying down, her breathing deepened into sleep. Isaac remained awake much longer, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of the soft sound of her breathing across the small cabin. It had been so long since he'd shared his space with another person that the simple presence of Josephine felt like an intrusion, not an unwelcome one, exactly, but disquieting nonetheless. He rose before dawn, moving quietly to avoid waking her. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean. The creek remained swollen but no longer seemed intent on devouring the valley. The sky to the east promised clear weather, at least temporarily. In the stable, he found the foal already awake, watching him with curious eyes. The young horse approached cautiously, sniffing Isaac's outstretched hand. "You caused quite a commotion yesterday, little one," Isaac murmured, stroking the foal's neck. Scout was a fine-looking animal, strong legs, good conformation, with a coat that promised to be a rich chestnut when fully dry. "He likes you." Isaac turned to find Josephine standing in the stable doorway, his oversized clothes still hanging on her frame, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. In the soft morning light, he noticed details he'd missed the day before, a dusting of freckles across her nose, a small scar at the corner of her right eyebrow, eyes that were more green than brown. "Animals are easier than people," he replied, stepping back from the foal. "Coffee's brewing inside." They shared a simple breakfast of leftover cornbread and more beans. Josephine asked few questions, respecting the boundaries Isaac had established with his silence. For his part, Isaac found himself wondering about her life before the flood, who she had been, what dreams she had nurtured, what had brought that shadow of sadness to her eyes. "I need to check in at the ranch," he said as they finished eating. "Let them know I'm all right, see what damage the storm did. You're welcome to stay here until I can send word to your brother." "I'd be grateful," Josephine replied, "though I'd like to accompany you to the ranch if possible. I should send a message to my brother as soon as possible." Isaac hesitated. Having her accompany him meant introducing her to others, explaining her presence, acknowledging the connection that had formed between them, however tenuous. But her request was reasonable, and he couldn't justify refusing. "We'll have to leave the foal here," he said. "He needs rest after yesterday's ordeal." Josephine nodded. "He'll be all right for a few hours. I'll make sure he has water and hay before we leave." The ride to the rocking bee took nearly an hour, the trail still muddy and treacherous in places. Josephine rode behind Isaac on Thunder, her arms loosely circling his waist. The physical contact was unavoidable but uncomfortable for Isaac, who had grown unaccustomed to such intimacy. The ranch was a hive of activity when they arrived, ranch hands busy assessing and repairing damage from the storm. Several fences were down, and cattle had scattered across the lower pastures. The main house, situated on higher ground, had weathered the storm well. Amos Bradley, the ranch owner, met them at the corral. A barrel-chested man in his 50s with a shock of white hair. He raised an eyebrow at the sight of Josephine. "Emerson, was starting to wonder if you got washed away." His gaze shifted to Josephine. "Madam." Isaac helped Josephine dismount before addressing his employer. "Mr. Bradley, this is Josephine Keller. Her wagon was caught in the flood yesterday. I helped her reach dry ground, but the bridge to Elkhorn Ridge is gone." Understanding dawned on Bradley's weathered face. "Keller? You must be Gordon Keller's sister. He rode through here yesterday looking for you, worried sick." Relief flooded Josephine's features. "Is he still here?" "No. Headed back to check if you'd arrived by another route. Said he'd return this afternoon if he hadn't found you." Bradley gestured toward the main house. "Mrs. Bradley would be happy to offer you some proper clothes and a hot meal while you wait." "Madam?" Josephine glanced at Isaac, who nodded encouragingly. "That's very kind, Mr. Bradley. Thank you." As she walked toward the house with Bradley, Isaac felt a curious sense of loss. He shook it off and turned his attention to the work at hand, joining the other ranch hands in rounding up scattered cattle and repairing fences. Throughout the morning, he found his gaze drifting repeatedly toward the main house, wondering what Josephine was doing, what she might be saying about him. The thought made him uncomfortable, as if she might somehow reveal parts of himself he preferred to keep hidden, even though they'd shared barely a dozen hours of acquaintance. Around midday, he spotted a rider approaching from the east, a tall man on a rangy bay horse. Gordon Keller, presumably. Isaac watched as Josephine emerged from the house and ran to meet her brother, who dismounted and embraced her with visible relief. Their reunion was touching, even from a distance. Isaac could see the family resemblance, the same straight posture, the same animated way of speaking. He turned away, focusing on hammering a fence post back into place, telling himself their reunion was none of his concern. "Emerson," Bradley called some time later. "Got someone who wants to thank you." Isaac reluctantly made his way to where Bradley stood with the Keller siblings. Gordon Keller extended his hand, his grip firm. "Mr. Emerson, my sister tells me you saved her life yesterday. I'm forever in your debt." Isaac shook the offered hand briefly. "Just happened to be in the right place. She says you also sheltered her foal. That young horse means the world to her." It wasn't any trouble. Josephine had changed into a borrowed dress that fit her much better than Isaac's clothes had. Her hair was neatly arranged, and some color had returned to her cheeks. She looked like she belonged in the civilized world of the ranch house, not in his sparse cabin. "We'd like to collect Scout this afternoon, if that's convenient," she said. "Gordon has a wagon we can use." Isaac nodded, irrationally disappointed by how quickly she was moving on. "Of course. I'll take you there." "There's no need to trouble yourself further," Gordon interjected. "Just point us in the right direction." "The trail's still dangerous in places," Isaac insisted. "Better if I show you." Gordon hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. We appreciate your continued assistance." They set out an hour later, Gordon driving a sturdy wagon while Isaac rode alongside on Thunder. Josephine sat beside her brother, occasionally glancing at Isaac when she thought he wasn't looking. The journey was largely silent, each lost in their own thoughts. At the cabin, Josephine immediately went to check on Scout, who greeted her with an enthusiastic nicker. Isaac helped Gordon unhitch the wagon team, while Josephine gathered the few belongings she'd left in the cabin, including her still damp dress. "You have a nice place here," Gordon commented, surveying the cabin and surrounding area. "Quiet. That's why I chose it," Isaac replied. "My sister says you've been very kind, not just saving her from the flood, but after as well." Isaac shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "That's not true. And we both know it." Gordon's expression became serious. "Josephine's had a difficult time since her husband's passing. James Walsh wasn't the man she thought he was, left her with nothing but debts and painful memories." Isaac wasn't sure how to respond. He hadn't asked for Josephine's history, hadn't invited this confidence. "She seems strong." "She is," Gordon nodded. "Stronger than she knows." Josephine emerged from the stable leading Scout, who seemed to have recovered well from his ordeal. "He's ready to travel," she announced. Loading the young horse into the wagon proved relatively simple, as Scout seemed to trust Josephine implicitly. Once the foal was secured, Josephine turned to Isaac, hesitating. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she said. "There's no need," Isaac replied, suddenly wanting to be done with this farewell. "Nevertheless, I am grateful." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object. "I want you to have this. It's not much, but..." She placed the item in his palm, a small silver pocket watch. Isaac started to protest, but Josephine shook her head. "It was my father's. One of the few things of value I have left. You saved my life and Scout's. Please accept it." The watch was old but well maintained, the silver case engraved with an intricate pattern of leaves. It felt heavy in Isaac's hand, weighted not just with silver, but with meaning he wasn't prepared to acknowledge. "I can't take this," he said, trying to return it. "You can," she insisted gently. "And I hope whenever you check the time, you'll remember that there are still good things in this world. Isaac Emerson." Before he could respond, she climbed into the wagon beside her brother. Gordon nodded respectfully to Isaac, then flicked the reins, setting the horses in motion. Isaac stood watching as the wagon rolled away, Josephine turning once to wave before they disappeared around a bend in the trail. The watch felt warm in his palm, already taking on his body heat. Against his better judgment, Isaac slipped it into his pocket rather than calling them back to return it. The cabin seemed unnaturally quiet after they'd gone. Isaac moved through his evening routine, mechanically feeding Thunder, preparing a simple supper, cleaning his rifle. But everything felt different somehow, the silence heavier than before. He took out the watch several times, examining its craftsmanship, wondering about its history. Had it been passed down through generations? Had Josephine's father carried it as he built a life for his family? The questions led to others about Josephine herself, where she would go from her brother's home, what she would make of her new beginning. Questions he had no right to ask about a woman he would likely never see again. Days passed, stretching into weeks. Isaac threw himself into his work at the ranch, volunteering for the longest shifts and most difficult tasks. Exhaustion, he found, was a good antidote for unwanted thoughts. Bradley noticed the change in him. "Pushing yourself mighty hard lately, Emerson." Isaac just shrugged. "Work needs doing." "Had a letter from Gordon Keller yesterday," Bradley mentioned casually. "Says his sister's settled in well. Helping with his children, teaching the oldest to read." Isaac nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He hadn't asked for news of Josephine, yet something in him lightened at hearing she was well. "Also mentioned she's been asking about you. Wanted to know if you were still working here." At this, Isaac looked up sharply. "What for?" Bradley shrugged. "Didn't say, just that she'd be obliged to know you were doing all right." "I'm fine," Isaac replied curtly. "Always am." The older man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll pass that along next time I write." May turned to June, and the land fully recovered from the spring floods. New grass grew where muddy devastation had been, and wildflowers carpeted the hillsides with splashes of color. Isaac continued his solitary existence. working hard during the day and returning to his empty cabin at night. The pocket watch became a constant companion. He found himself checking it throughout the day, the simple act of opening the case and noting the time somehow comforting. He wondered if Josephine had known it would affect him this way, if she'd intentionally left this piece of herself with him, as a reminder that he was not as detached from the world as he pretended to be. One evening in late June, Isaac returned home to find a visitor waiting on his porch, Gordon Keller, hat in hand. "Emerson," he greeted. "Hope you don't mind me stopping by." Isaac dismounted, wary. "Something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly." Gordon seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "It's Josephine. She's not been herself lately. Quiet, distracted." Isaac led Thunder to the stable, Gordon following. "Sorry to hear that, but I don't see how it concerns me." "That foal of hers, Scout? He's growing into a fine young horse. Got to thinking he could use some proper training from someone who knows horses." Gordon watched as Isaac removed Thunder's saddle. "Bradley tells me you have a way with difficult animals. Says there isn't a horse on his ranch you can't gentle." "I've worked with a few," Isaac acknowledged, suspicion growing. "Your sister's foal needs training, you're saying? Could use a professional touch, and I'd pay you fair wage for your time." Isaac turned to face Gordon directly. "You rode all the way out here to ask me to train a horse? There must be a dozen men closer to your place who could do the job." Gordon had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Truth is, Josephine specifically asked for you. Said she trusts you with Scout more than anyone else." The admission hung in the air between them. Isaac busied himself brushing Thunder down, buying time to control his unexpected reaction to this news. "I have commitments here," he finally said. "Spoke to Bradley already. He says you're due some time off and he can spare you for a few weeks." Gordon placed his hat back on his head. "Just think about it, Emerson. I'll be in town until tomorrow afternoon if you decide you're interested." After Gordon left, Isaac sat on his porch for a long time, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The pocket watch lay open in his palm, its steady ticking like a second heartbeat. Why would Josephine ask for him specifically? Was it truly about the horse, or was there something more? And why did the prospect of seeing her again both terrify and exhilarate him? Isaac closed the watch with a decisive snap. He was being foolish. Josephine was a young widow looking for a horse trainer, nothing more. If he went to Elkhorn Ridge, it would be as a professional doing a job no different from breaking horses for Bradley or any other rancher. The decision made, he began packing what he would need for a few weeks away from home. Isaac arrived at Elkhorn Ridge 3 days later, leading Thunder and a pack horse carrying his gear. The Keller Ranch was larger than he'd expected, a sprawling property with good grazing land, a large barn, and a comfortable 2-story house painted white with green trim. Gordon greeted him in the yard, clearly pleased by Isaac's decision. "Glad you decided to come. Josephine will be happy to see you." "I'm here to work with the horse," Isaac reminded him, dismounting. "Nothing more." Gordon's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe this, but he simply nodded. "Of course. Let me show you where you'll be staying." The accommodations were a small cabin near the barn, clean and well-maintained. It had clearly been built for a ranch hand or foreman, with basic furnishings and a stone fireplace. "This will do fine," Isaac said, appreciating the privacy it would afford. "Good. Get yourself settled, then come up to the house for supper. Josephine's been cooking all afternoon." Isaac froze in the act of unpacking his saddlebags. "She knows I'm coming?" "Of course. Rode out to tell her as soon as you agreed." Gordon's expression softened slightly. "She's been happier the last few days. More like her old self." The implication made Isaac uncomfortable. "Mr. Keller, I should be clear about something. I'm here to train a horse, not to—" "Court my sister," Gordon finished. "I understand that, Emerson, but I also understand that sometimes life has different plans for us than the ones we make for ourselves." Before Isaac could formulate a response, Gordon left, calling over his shoulder, "Supper's at 6, don't be late." Left alone, Isaac finished unpacking. then took his time washing up, changing into his cleanest shirt and trimming his beard. He told himself these efforts were simply a matter of respect for his hosts, not any particular desire to make a good impression on Josephine. When he finally walked up to the main house, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The front door opened before he could knock, revealing Josephine in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Isaac," she said, his name sounding different in her voice than it ever had before. "You came." For a moment he couldn't speak, struck by how vibrant she looked compared to the rain-soaked woman he'd rescued months ago. "Your brother made a persuasive argument about your foal needing training." A smile tugged at her lips. "Did he? How diplomatic of him." She stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "Please, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The inside of the Keller home was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and family photographs adorning the walls. Gordon's wife, Martha, greeted Isaac warmly, as did their 3 children, Emma, age 10, Henry, age 8, and little Sarah, just 5. The family dynamic was easy and affectionate, something Isaac had almost forgotten could exist. Throughout the meal, Isaac found himself watching Josephine, the graceful way she moved, how she listened intently when others spoke, the genuine affection she showed her nieces and nephew. She seemed to belong here, in this family setting, in a way that highlighted the emptiness of his own existence. "Uncle Gordon says you saved Aunt Josie from drowning," Emma announced during a lull in conversation, fixing Isaac with a serious stare. "Emma," Martha admonished, "that's not appropriate dinner conversation." "But I want to know," the girl persisted. "Was it like in my storybook, where the knight rescues the princess?" Isaac glanced at Josephine, who looked both embarrassed and amused. "Not exactly," he replied carefully. "Your aunt is braver than any storybook princess. She was trying to save her foal when I happened along." "Scout!" Sarah exclaimed. "He's my favorite. Aunt Josie lets me brush him sometimes." "Is that so?" Isaac smiled at the little girl. "Well, I'll be working with Scout for a while. Perhaps you can help me sometimes." Sarah's eyes widened with delight. "Really? Can I, Mama?" Martha exchanged a glance with her husband. "If Mr. Emerson says it's all right, and if you're very careful to follow his instructions." The conversation flowed easily after that, with the children peppering Isaac with questions about horses and his work at the Rocking Bee. He found himself relaxing despite his initial reservations, drawn in by the family's genuine warmth. After dinner, while Martha put the children to bed and Gordon retired to his study, Josephine suggested a walk to see Scout. "He's in the small paddock behind the barn," she explained as they stepped outside into the cool evening air. "I thought you might want to see him before you begin work tomorrow." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Josephine spoke again. "I want to thank you for coming. I know it wasn't an easy decision." Isaac glanced at her profile, silvered by the rising moon. "Your brother made it sound important to you." "It is," she hesitated, "though perhaps not entirely for the reasons he gave you." They reached the paddock fence, where Scout was visible as a darker shape against the night sky. The young horse approached at Josephine's soft whistle, clearly recognizing her voice. He had grown considerably since Isaac had last seen him, his frame filling out with promising muscle. "He's developing well," Isaac observed, extending a hand for the young horse to sniff. Scout remembered him, showing no fear as Isaac ran a hand down his neck. "He is." Josephine watched them with a small smile. "But that's not the only reason I asked Gordon to bring you here." Isaac's hand stilled on Scout's neck. "Oh? I've thought about you often since that day," she admitted quietly. "About your kindness, your quiet strength, about how empty your cabin felt, despite everything you'd done to make it a home." Her directness caught him off guard. "Miss Keller." "Josephine," she corrected gently. "After what we've been through, surely we can dispense with formalities." Isaac nodded, buying time to collect his thoughts. "Josephine, then. I'm not sure what you're expecting from me." "Nothing," she replied simply. "That is, nothing you're not willing to give. I just I wanted to see you again, to know if what I felt during those hours in your cabin was real or simply a product of our unusual circumstances. And what did you feel? The question escaped before Isaac could stop it. Josephine turned to face him fully, moonlight illuminating her features. A connection. A sense that you understood something about loss and survival that most people don't. She smiled faintly, and perhaps a foolish hope that you might have felt it too. Isaac looked away, focusing on Scout, who had lost interest in the humans and wandered back to graze. I'm not good company, Josephine. Haven't been for a long time. You were good company for me, she countered. And for Scout. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm lightly. Do you still have the watch? Isaac's hand moved automatically to his pocket where the silver timepiece rested. Yes. Her smile widened. Good. That's something at least. Before he could respond, she stepped back. It's getting late and you must be tired from your journey. We can talk more tomorrow after you've had time to settle in. Isaac watched her walk back toward the house, conflicting emotions warring within him. Part of him wanted to call her back, to continue their conversation, to explore whatever connection she believed existed between them. But a larger part, the part that had protected him from pain for 5 long years, counseled caution, distance, safety. He remained by the paddock long after she'd gone, contemplating the path that had led him here and wondering where it might lead next. The following days established a rhythm. Isaac spent his mornings working with Scout, who proved an intelligent and willing pupil. The young horse learned quickly, moving from basic groundwork to accepting a saddle with minimal resistance. In the afternoons, Isaac helped with general ranch work, falling into an easy partnership with Gordon and his hired hands. The physical labor was familiar and satisfying, allowing him to contribute something tangible to the family that had welcomed him. Evenings were spent with the Kellers, enjoying Martha's cooking, helping the children with their chores, sitting on the porch as the sun set. Isaac found himself drawn into their family life almost without realizing it, his customary reserve gradually giving way to something warmer. Throughout it all, Josephine remained a constant, gentle presence. She never pushed for more than Isaac seemed willing to give, yet he could feel her quiet observation, her patient waiting. She joined him some mornings to work with Scout, demonstrating a natural affinity with the young horse that impressed even Isaac. You have a way with him, he commented one morning, watching as Scout followed Josephine through a series of turns in the round pen. He trusts me, she replied simply, and I trust him. Trust doesn't come easily to all of us, Isaac said, the words carrying more weight than he'd intended. Josephine stopped, letting Scout nuzzle her shoulder. No, it doesn't, especially when it's been broken before. She looked at Isaac directly. My husband wasn't just in debt when he died, Isaac. He had betrayed my trust in countless ways, lies, other women, promises he never intended to keep. She stroked Scout's neck absently. I thought I'd never trust anyone again. Then the flood came. And there you were, risking your life for a stranger and her foolish attachment to a foal. Isaac didn't know how to respond. He'd suspected there was more to her story than she'd initially shared, but hearing it confirmed stirred something protective in him. I'm sorry for what you went through, he finally said. As I am for whatever caused you to retreat from the world, she replied gently. Gordon told me you lost your family. I won't ask for details, they're yours to share or keep private. But I want you to know that I understand something of what it means to rebuild a life from broken pieces. The conversation might have continued, but they were interrupted by Sarah's arrival, eager for her promised turn to help with Scout. Isaac welcomed the distraction, focusing on teaching the little girl how to brush the young horse properly while keeping a safe distance from his hooves. That evening, unable to sleep, Isaac sat on the porch of his cabin, watching the stars. The pocket watch lay open in his palm, its steady ticking a counterpoint to the chorus of night insects. Josephine's words echoed in his mind, rebuilding a life from broken pieces. Was that what he had been doing these past 5 years? It felt more like he'd been preserving the broken pieces, protecting them from further damage rather than creating something new. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Looking up, he saw Josephine walking toward him, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. "I saw your light," she explained, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Couldn't sleep either." Isaac shook his head. "Too much on my mind." "May I join you?" He hesitated only briefly before nodding, making room for her on the rough wooden bench. They sat in silence for several minutes, the space between them charged with unspoken words. "My wife's name was Rachel," Isaac said suddenly, surprising himself as much as Josephine. "She was pregnant when we moved west. Said she wanted our child born under open skies, not in the crowded tenements where we grew up." Josephine remained silent, but he could feel her attention. Her quiet encouragement to continue. "We built a life small but good. Had a son, Daniel. He was almost 2 when the fever came through." Isaac swallowed hard, the memories still sharp despite the passing years. "Took them both in less than a week. I buried them on a hilltop overlooking our homestead." "I'm so sorry, Isaac," Josephine whispered. "Sold the place soon after. Couldn't bear to stay, but couldn't bear to leave the territory either. Been drifting since, working where I can, keeping to myself." He closed the pocket watch with a soft click. "Until the flood." Josephine's hand found his, her touch warm and steady. "Thank you for telling me." Isaac looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how natural it felt. "I haven't spoken of them in years. Sometimes sharing our grief makes it more bearable," she said softly. "Not smaller exactly, but less consuming." They sat in companionable silence after that, hands still linked, until the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon. Only then did Josephine reluctantly rise. "I should go back before the house wakes," she said, "but I'm glad we talked, Isaac." He nodded, suddenly unable to find words for the emotions coursing through him. As she turned to leave, he spoke her name, causing her to pause and look back. "I'm glad too," he managed. Her smile stayed with him long after she'd gone, like a candle flame illuminating corners of his heart he'd thought permanently darkened. The following weeks brought a gradual transformation in Isaac. The rigid boundaries he'd maintained for years began to soften, allowing him to participate more fully in life at Elkhorn Ridge. He joined in family gatherings, laughed at Gordon's dry humor, allowed the children to draw him into their games, and always there was Josephine, patient, kind, never demanding more than he was ready to give. Their evening conversations became a cherished ritual, sometimes lasting well into the night as they shared stories of their pasts and cautious hopes for the future. Scouts training progressed remarkably well. By mid-July, the young horse was accepting a rider for short periods, with Isaac carefully introducing him to the weight and movement of a person on his back. Josephine watched these sessions with pride, occasionally taking her turn in the saddle under Isaac's watchful guidance. "He's going to be a fine mount," Isaac commented one afternoon as they cooled Scout down after a particularly successful session. "Steady temperament, good instincts." "Thanks to your training," Josephine replied. "I never could have accomplished this on my own." "You underestimate yourself," Isaac said, surprised by how easily the compliment came to his lips. "Scout responds to you better than anyone. The bond between you is special." Josephine smiled, pleased by his words. Special bonds seemed to be forming all around Elkhorn Ridge these days. Before Isaac could respond to her gentle teasing, Gordon approached from the main house. "Got a telegram from Bradley," he announced, holding up a piece of paper. "Wants to know when you're planning to return, Emerson. Says he needs you for the fall roundup." The message was a stark reminder that Isaac's time at Elkhorn Ridge was temporary, a professional arrangement with an expected end date. He'd managed to push that reality aside in recent weeks, but now it confronted him directly. "When does he need me back?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "First week of August at the latest." Gordon handed him the telegram. "That's about 2 weeks from now." 2 weeks. The time frame seemed impossibly short for all that remained unsaid between him and Josephine. I should reply today, Isaac said. Let him know my plans. Gordon nodded. I'll be riding into town this afternoon if you want to send a response. After Gordon left, a heavy silence fell between Isaac and Josephine as they finished caring for Scout. The easy companionship of moments before had been replaced by an awareness of time slipping away. Will you go back? Josephine finally asked as they walked toward the barn. Isaac hesitated. I gave Bradley my word when I hired on. The ranch depends on having enough hands for roundup. Of course. Her voice was steady, but Isaac could hear the disappointment beneath her composure. You have commitments. Josephine, he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. How could he explain the conflicting emotions within him, the pull of duty and habit, versus the unexpected longing to stay at Elkhorn Ridge, to explore whatever was developing between them? It's all right, Isaac, she said with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I've always known you would leave eventually. Let's just enjoy the time we have left. She walked ahead into the barn, leaving Isaac standing in the yard, the telegram clutched in his hand like a sentence he didn't want to serve. That evening, Isaac drafted a response to Bradley, confirming he would return for the roundup. The decision felt right in terms of his professional obligations, but it left a hollow feeling in his chest. As the days passed, Isaac found himself mentally cataloging moments with Josephine, the way sunlight caught in her hair as she worked in Martha's garden, her patience when teaching Sarah to read, the sound of her laughter during family suppers. Each memory was carefully stored away, a treasure to sustain him when he returned to his solitary existence. Scout's training continued to progress, and Isaac took satisfaction in knowing the young horse would be well prepared by the time he left. On their final training day, he asked Josephine to ride Scout through all the exercises they'd practiced, observing with pride as horse and rider moved together in perfect harmony. He's ready, Isaac announced when they finished. You won't have any trouble with him now. Josephine dismounted, running a hand along Scout's gleaming neck. Thanks to you, she looked up at Isaac, emotion plain in her eyes. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done, not just with Scout, but everything. Isaac shook his head. There's no debt between us, Josephine. Isn't there? She stepped closer. You saved my life in the flood. You came when I asked, even though it meant leaving your home and routine. You've shared parts of yourself I suspect few people have seen. Her voice softened. And you've helped me believe in new beginnings again. The intensity of her gaze made Isaac's heart race. For weeks they had circled each other carefully. Their growing connection expressed in small gestures and shared conversations. But now, with his departure imminent, the unspoken feelings between them demanded acknowledgement. Josephine, he began, his voice rough with emotion, I'm not the man I was before I came here. Being with you, with your family, it's changed something in me I thought was permanently broken. Hope bloomed in her expression. Then stay, Isaac. Not forever if you're not ready for that. Just don't go back yet. The request hung in the air between them, simple yet profound in its implications. Stay. The word echoed in Isaac's mind, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. I gave Bradley my word, he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. And if he could spare you longer, if Gordon offered you work here? She reached for his hand. There are always choices, Isaac, even when it seems like there aren't. Before he could respond, they were interrupted by Henry calling from the house that supper was ready. The moment broken, they walked back in silence, the question of Isaac's departure hovering unresolved between them. That night, Isaac sat alone in his cabin, contemplating Josephine's words. Were there really choices available to him, or was he simply delaying the inevitable return to his solitary life? He took out the pocket watch, studying its intricate engraving by lamplight. Josephine had given it to him as a token of gratitude, but it had become something more, a physical reminder of the connection between them, of possibilities he'd long ago stopped considering. A knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Gordon standing outside, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "Thought you might appreciate a nightcap," the older man said. "Mind if I join you?" Isaac stepped back, allowing Gordon to enter. They settled at the small table, where Gordon poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each glass. "To successful training," Gordon proposed, raising his glass. Isaac returned the toast, appreciating the smooth burn of the liquor. They drank in companionable silence for a moment before Gordon spoke again. "So, you're heading back to the Rocking Bee day after tomorrow?" "That's the plan," Isaac confirmed. Gordon studied him over the rim of his glass. "Plans can change, Emerson, especially when there's good reason." Isaac met the other man's gaze. "You have something specific in mind?" "As a matter of fact, I do." Gordon set his glass down. "I've been meaning to expand my operation here, breed better stock, maybe experiment with some of those new techniques they're talking about back east. Could use a man with your horse sense. You're offering me a job. A partnership eventually if things work out." Gordon's expression was serious. "This isn't charity, Emerson. I've seen how you work, how you think. You'd be an asset to Elkhorn Ridge." Isaac considered the offer, turning it over in his mind. "And your sister? What does she think about this idea?" "Josephine doesn't know I'm talking to you," Gordon replied honestly. "This is strictly business between us men, though I'd be lying if I said I haven't noticed how she lights up when you're around." He leaned forward slightly. 5 years is a long time to wander, Emerson. Maybe it's time to find a home again." The words struck deeper than Gordon could know, touching the core of the loneliness Isaac had carried since Rachel and Daniel's deaths. Home. The concept had become abstract, disconnected from physical location or material possessions. "I'll think about it," Isaac promised. Gordon nodded, seemingly satisfied. He finished his whiskey and stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "Just one more thing, Emerson. My sister deserves happiness after everything she's been through. If you're not serious about what's developing between you, better to make a clean break now." The warning was delivered without malice, but with unmistakable brotherly concern. Isaac nodded his understanding, and Gordon left, the door closing quietly behind him. Alone again, Isaac paced the small confines of the cabin. Gordon's words echoing in his mind. A partnership, a home, a future that included Josephine. The possibilities both exhilarated and terrified him. Sleep eluded him that night as he wrestled with the decision before him. By dawn, exhausted but clear-headed, he knew what he had to do. Isaac spent the morning composing a letter to Bradley, explaining his decision to remain at Elkhorn Ridge for the foreseeable future. He expressed gratitude for the opportunities the rancher had provided and promised to help find a replacement before the roundup began. With the letter sealed, Isaac sought out Gordon, finding him in the barn checking a mare's injured leg. "I'd like to accept your offer," Isaac said without preamble. "If it still stands." Gordon straightened, a smile spreading across his features. "It stands. Glad to hear it. Emerson." He extended his hand, which Isaac shook firmly. "We'll work out the details later. For now, I expect there's someone else you should tell." Isaac nodded, suddenly nervous at the prospect of finding Josephine. What if he had misinterpreted her feelings? What if his decision to stay complicated rather than simplified their relationship? He found her in the orchard behind the main house, picking early apples with Emma and Sarah. The domestic scene, Josephine patiently showing Sarah how to twist the fruit gently to remove it without damaging the branch, caused a surge of emotion Isaac couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't until later that he recognized it as longing for family, for belonging, for the ordinary moments of shared life he'd denied himself for so long. Emma spotted him first. "Mr. Emerson, come see how many apples we've picked." Josephine turned at her niece's exclamation, her expression guarded as Isaac approached. "Good morning," she greeted. "We're stocking up for Martha's apple butter." "Looks like a good crop," Isaac replied, searching for a way to speak privately with her. Sensing the adults needed to talk, Emma took her sister's hand. "Come on, Sarah, let's take these inside to Mama." Once the girls had gone, Josephine set down her basket. "Was there something you needed, Isaac? I thought you'd be preparing for your journey tomorrow." "There's been a change of plans," he said carefully. "I've written to Bradley. I won't be returning to the Rocking Bee." Surprise flickered across her features. "Oh? Have you found another position?" "Your brother has offered me work here. A partnership? Eventually." Isaac took a step closer. "I've accepted." Josephine's expression remained neutral, though her eyes betrayed a cautious hope. "That's wonderful. Gordon is an excellent judge of character. You'll be an asset to Elkhorn Ridge." "That's not why I'm staying," Isaac said quietly. "No? No." He reached for her hand, encouraged when she didn't pull away. "I'm staying because somewhere between pulling you from that flood and watching you with Scout yesterday, I realized something important." "What's that?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My heart has found its home again, Josephine. Here. With you." The words, once released, seemed to take on a life of their own. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know I want to discover it together, if you'll have me." For a moment, Josephine stood perfectly still, her eyes searching his face as if looking for any sign of uncertainty. Then, with a small cry, she closed the distance between them, her free hand coming to rest against his chest. "Are you certain, Isaac? Truly certain? Because I couldn't bear it if you changed your mind later." Instead of answering with words, Isaac leaned down and kissed her gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. It was their first kiss, but it carried the weight of all they had shared and all they hoped to build together. When they finally separated, both breathless, Isaac pressed his forehead to hers. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Josephine's smile was radiant. "Then welcome home, Isaac Emerson." The seasons turned, and with them, Isaac's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined on that rainy day when he'd spotted a stranded wagon in a flooded valley. He and Josephine were married that October in a simple ceremony beneath the golden leaves of the orchard where he had declared his love. The entire community turned out to celebrate, and even Amos Bradley made the journey from the Rocking Bee, bringing with him a fine pair of matched colts as a wedding gift. Together, Isaac and Josephine built onto his small cabin, transforming it into a comfortable home on a corner of the Elkhorn Ridge property. Scout grew into a magnificent horse, eventually siring a line of exceptionally intelligent and steady mounts that became sought after throughout the territory. As Gordon had predicted, Isaac proved invaluable to the ranch's operations, introducing new breeding techniques and training methods that elevated Elkhorn Ridge's reputation. Within 3 years, the partnership became official, with Isaac overseeing the horse program while Gordon focused on cattle. The pocket watch remained Isaac's constant companion, though now it tracked happy hours rather than lonely ones. He developed the habit of checking it before returning home each evening, his heart lightening at the thought of Josephine waiting for him. Their first child, a daughter they named Rachel after Isaac's first wife, arrived in the summer of 1880, a sturdy, curious infant with her mother's hazel eyes and her father's quiet determination. A son, Thomas, followed 2 years later, completing their family circle. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Isaac and Josephine often sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge above the valley where their story had begun. Sometimes they spoke of the future of the children's education, of ranch improvements, of dreams still taking shape. Other times they simply enjoyed the comfortable silence between them, a silence built on trust and understanding. On one such evening, as they celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary, Josephine presented Isaac with a small wooden box. Inside lay a new silver chain for his pocket watch, intricately crafted and engraved with their initials. "So you always carry both your past and your present with you," she explained as he examined the gift. Isaac attached the chain to the watch, appreciating how it combined remembrance of what was lost with celebration of what had been found. "It's perfect," he said, pulling her close. "Like us." "Perfectly imperfect," she corrected with a smile. "Still learning, still growing." Isaac nodded, thinking of how far they had come from strangers thrown together by disaster to partners bound by choice and love. The journey hadn't been without challenges. Josephine's occasional nightmares about the flood, Isaac's moments of guilt when happiness felt like betrayal of Rachel's memory, the ordinary difficulties of marriage and parenthood and ranch life. Yet through it all, they had chosen each other, day after day, building something neither had believed possible in the aftermath of their respective losses. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Josephine asked, following her own train of thought. "If the bridge hadn't collapsed that day, if you hadn't been riding near the creek." "Sometimes," Isaac admitted, "but then I remember something my father used to say, that life's biggest blessings often arrive disguised as its greatest challenges." Josephine nestled closer against him. "Your father was a wise man." "He was," Isaac agreed, "and he would have loved you almost as much as I do." As night deepened around them, Isaac reflected on the strange, winding path that had led him to this moment, a path that began with unimaginable loss, but had ultimately delivered him to a place of profound belonging. The flood that had threatened Josephine's life had also washed away the barriers around his heart, allowing love to flow back in when he least expected it. Scout nickered softly from the nearby paddock, and somewhere in the house, one of the children turned in their sleep. These were the sounds of home. Isaac realized not just a physical place, but a state of being, a certainty that wherever Josephine and their children were, his heart had found its true destination. "Shall we go inside?" Josephine asked eventually, stifling a yawn. Isaac nodded, rising and offering his hand to help her up. As they walked together toward the warm light of their home, he thought of all the evenings to come, all the ordinary, extraordinary moments they would share as the years unfolded before them. The pocket watch ticked steadily in his vest pocket, marking not just time, but the rhythm of a life reclaimed from sorrow and rebuilt with love. Isaac Emerson, once a drifter with nowhere to belong, had finally found his way home,